It's cybersecurity headlines.
Chip shortage has national security implications. Cloud security alert fatigue hits alarming levels, and Russia is running out of data storage space. These are some of the stories that the phenomenal CISO series reporters have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get some chance for some insight and opinion and expertise on these stories from our guest, Eric Hussey, who's the CISO of Aptiv. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, David. Glad to be here.
And by the way, I'm David Spark. I am the host and producer of many shows over in the CISO series. I'm stepping in for Rich Straffolino for today, who cannot be available, but we're going to keep running it anyways for you. Our sponsor for today's episode is Varonis. Zero trust, zero damage. More from Varonis later in the show. And huge thanks to Varonis as well. They've been sponsors all this week with cybersecurity headlines. You can join us over on LinkedIn Live. Just go to CISOseries.com, the Week in Review page to find the link, or just go to LinkedIn and find CISO Series. And we're live right now. So join us and you can join in the conversation as well. We have just 20 minutes and let's jump into it. First story. Cyber Command Chief tells Congress chip shortage has national security implications. China's increasing progress toward producing enough semiconductor chips domestically to avoid relying on foreign trade is an issue of great concern for the U.S., says U.S. Cyber Command National Security Agency head General Paul Nakasone. Addressing House Intelligence Committee members, he stated that China's progress toward chip independence would give the Chinese more leverage to act as they please without fear of sanctions. He added the United States is lagging in domestic semiconductor chip production and noted that Ukraine and Russia produce 90% of America's neon gas, which is critical for the lasers used to make chips. So, Eric, there are three big elephants in this room. One is the relevance of needing China to remain non-independent, the admission that the U.S. is lagging in chip production, and third, the possibility or the possible surprising revelation that most of America's neon comes from exactly where we don't want it to be right now. Do you want to comment on any or all of these?
Yeah, sure. So, I'll just comment on, from a chip shortage perspective, or where the aggregation of chips are created in the world today. I mean, it's really no surprise, right? I mean, there is Made in China 2025, right? That's not new news. Um, you know, whether China is our friend one year or not, the reality of the situation is that we have to have some type of national capability here, right? We talk about cyber wars. Um, there's a component to actually fighting a cyber war, and that's hardware, right? You still need to get the chips, right? So, we've all experienced this from uh, not being able to get the automobile that we want to ridiculously long lead times for telecom equipment, 20 weeks, 30 weeks just to get hardware. You need hardware in order to protect your national interests from a cybersecurity perspective as well. Not everything is software. So, not
Yeah, and we
surprising
always
here.
keep hearing that software is eating the world, but it may take events like this for us to realize how vulnerable we may be in these situations, yes?
You still need hardware, right? At the end of the day, you still need hardware to lay the software down onto. So yeah, it's a real challenge for us, we're getting ahead of it. I think Intel just announced a large $20 billion investment in a foundry, I believe in Ohio. Specifics aren't out there yet on what's going to be produced and the production volume there, but it's a step in the right direction.
ZeroClick flaws in widely used UPS devices threaten critical infrastructure. Now, according to Armis, there are critical security vulnerabilities in widely used uninterruptible power supplies, or UPS devices, that could allow for remote takeover, meaning that malicious actors could cause business disruptions, data loss, and even physical harm to critical infrastructure. Now, this threat is called TL Storm and is located in APC Smart UPS devices, and I know a lot of people use those, which belongs to Schneider Electric. Now, forcing it to physically damage itself or other assets connected to it, they said. So, Eric, once again, this is another infrastructure weakness story, since the vulnerability could lead to control of damage of the assets themselves. Now, we're seeing infrastructure stories regularly in the headlines, and the White House has been making clear strides about improving it. What are your concerns about this being specifically a zero-click flaw? Does that raise the stakes somewhat?
I would say yes and no, right? I think zero-click flaws have been around for quite some time, right? That's not really new news there. They can be especially damaging and virtually undetectable. I think one of the bigger challenges we have, though, is just the prevalence of all of these critical security vulnerabilities, right? Anybody who's ever worked in a cybersecurity organization knows that you have to deal with some amount of security vulnerability within your ecosystem, right? But it's really about really addressing the vulnerabilities that are really critical to your business. In this case, national and critical infrastructure, right? So um, we need to do a better job, because even if we have the fixes and the remediations to take care of this problem, are we actually going to follow through and do it? And history has told us that we don't do it completely all the time, right? So the bigger concern for me is not the fact that it's a zero click. It's more of it's just another vulnerability out there that can be quite damaging and used by a nation state threat actor to really hurt our national interests.
If any of you are watching us on LinkedIn right now as we are live, please send us your comments on these stories and the stories that are coming up. Mobile endpoints see a lot of malicious apps. A lot of numbers to read here, but it is worth it, so pay attention. A new report by the security firm Zimperium found that in 2021, 25% of mobile endpoints have encountered a malicious app. The report also found a 466% increase in exploited zero-day vulnerabilities on mobile endpoints in the year, with iOS devices accounting for 60% of the victims. 75% of phishing websites seen in the study were specifically targeting mobile devices. Overall, 42% of enterprises reported either mobile devices or web apps led to security incidents in 2021. Eric, so similar in concept to our previous story, we're seeing big numbers here. Hackers going after endpoints as a weak link in the chain. With iOS devices being so prevalent here, whose responsibility is it to be proactive on security for mobile devices? The employer or the employee? And my guess is you're going to say both.
Yeah, I would say it's more than just both, right? So I think there's a shared responsibility model all the way from the vendor to the employer to the employee, right? And that becomes very complicated, right? So the vendor can only do so much. As a company that employs many employees, we can only do so much, right? Depends on your deployment model. There's privacy concerns that come into play. Is it a company issued versus BYOD? There's lots of challenges there, right? And then lastly, you know, people are the weakest link, right? It's just the reality of the situation. But it's important to continue to educate our workforce on, mobile is, a threat, a threat vector that is clearly being exploited more now than ever, and we really need to kind of make sure that we're looking at that as well.
One of the major realizations of mobile is such a huge threat vector is that when we look at our mobile phones, we actually don't see the amount of information that we see on our desktops, specifically with emails. And as my co-host for the other show, Mike Johnson, likes to say, our weakest link can also actually be our strongest asset as well. Agreed?
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. There's no question about that thought there, and I would fully agree. So, yeah, nothing more to add there, but it's a great comment.
All right. Biden set to sign bill with cyber disclosure provision. Last week, both the U.S. House and Senate passed a bill which includes a provision that critical infrastructure operators must report cyber attacks within 72 hours. It now goes to President Biden's desk to sign into law. Disclosure would be required for substantial cybersecurity incidents. Wondered what substantial is, but any ransomware payment would also have to be disclosed within 24 hours. The law also gives CISA the authority to subpoena for failure to disclose within those timelines. Eric, this looks like a proactive step, so this is awesome. But cyber business can be murky and indefinable at times, hence the substantial term. And laws like this tend to lead to bad publicity for the offenders. Do you feel this type of law will have an impact given many companies' tendency to quietly pay ransoms in a way that would not spook the market?
Here's what I would say. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think
Mm-hmm.
that some of the language is murky, like substantial. And what is a critical sector? What's actually the definition behind that? And CISA has a great website that kind of actually details what sectors and what kind of companies would fit into that. I think there's more teeth that the government, or more levers that they're actually able to pull now, to almost force companies into doing the right thing for the greater good, I would say, right? So it's a step in the right direction. I think it will have some bite to it. I think we've seen the government get a lot more involved over the past 2 years. Um, and I think the only thing that you're right, there's concerns on both sides, but I think disclosure is an important part of us getting better as well. And I think that we need to take that road to get to a better place as a from a national perspective, or just across the world with improving cyber.
Agreed. And now let's spend a few moments with our sponsor, Varonis. A customer of Varonis said, the first time we got hit with ransomware, it took us weeks to recover. The second time we got hit, it took us 2 hours. Why? Because we had Varonis. Varonis reduces the ransomware blast radius and monitors our most important data automatically. So you can hear more about how Varonis does this at varonis.com/CISO series. And Varonis is spelled VARONIS.com/CISO series, which I hope you know how to spell CISO series. FTC to find Cathay Press for cover-up of massive data breach. The Federal Trade Commission announced plans to slap Cathay Press custom t-shirt and merchandise site with a $500,000 fine for a breach that affected over 23 million of its users. Two things here. Instead of informing customers about the breach, Cathay Press just closed users' accounts and then charged them each a $25 account closure fee. Yikes! And the FTC also said that Cathay Press stored customer social security numbers and password reset answers in plain text. It has been told to implement MFA and encrypt social security numbers stored on its servers. Eric, really, this sounds like a slap on the wrist. I mean, what Cathay Press did on all accounts here, it's astonishing. So would you consider plain text storage of PII to be more than just an oversight? And also, this whole thing about the $25 closure fee, why that even existed and why people accepted that is astonishing to me. Or is this a case of all of this a case of buyer beware for consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in cyber for over 20 years, and honestly, some things I see, nothing surprises me from time to time. But I think that this, I believe, if I remember correctly, from when this all started, was in 2019, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping in the past 3 years we've come a long way as a cyber community, but I do think it's an absolute slap on the wrist. Right? And I think that's been the problem for a long time, is that the fines actually become rounding errors in some balance sheets, and make it make a business case in some ways to not invest in our cyber programs. Why are we going to spend millions and millions of dollars a year on a cyber program when a fine's only going to cost $500,000? There is that angle to it, right? And I respect that angle to a certain extent, but it's a slap on the wrist. I'm hoping we're doing less and less of this throughout our digital community, and we're only getting better. So again, it's a slap on the wrist, but an example of what not to do, and it's a very public example of what not to do. And I think that's going to help everybody improve.
I want to mention we have some comments already. Anthony Rossi has an extreme response to this. Says Cathay Press shouldn't be allowed to be in business anymore. Yikes! I don't know if we need to go that extreme, but it's astonishing that these were allowed to happen, I would think. And I think we have another comment coming in. Yes, this comes from Dwayne Baker. It said, gentlemen, the war has highlighted how critical cybersecurity is. I agree that there is shared responsibility. Education definitely helps, but I feel that most people aren't ready to take on the daily tasks associated with securing their IoT devices. So not on the Cathay Press, but wanted to get Dwayne Baker's comment in there. Thank you, Dwayne. Report uncovers alarming level of alert fatigue in cloud environments. So a report from Orca Security reveals that security teams are inundated with cloud security alerts. Not surprising, with 59% of respondents receiving more than 500 cloud security alerts per day. And you're complaining about emails. Monitoring alerts is causing burnout, with roughly 60% of respondents indicating that alert fatigue has contributed to staff turnover and also has created internal friction. The report says that 40% of respondents' alerts are false positives, but more than half of respondents indicated that critical alerts are being missed. Eric, it's long been known that IT and security people are overworked, but when
Yeah.
so many critical alerts go unintended, and that has to be a cause for concern, and 500 alerts per day, does that number surprise you, or is this just we're getting just way too many false positives?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot. I think security teams are under constant pressure to try to always defend, right? The reality of the situation is you can't always defend. What you should do is defend what's the most important to your business, right? I found that strategy's worked quite well for me personally in designing programs. But from a cloud perspective, right, that is the context, right? We've been missing alerts for a long time in this industry, right? We've been facing too many tickets per day for an analyst to actually handle. Cloud has just exacerbated that, right? We're moving to the cloud faster. We're spinning up and spinning down workloads more than we ever have. Security is part of that, right? So yeah, I think that there are methods to, I would say, reduce that alert fatigue. And I've employed a variety of methods to do that, so the analysts actually have a fighting chance on protecting what's most critical to the
Just
business.
one tip. Just give us one tip for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, some of the companies that I'm very familiar with, right? They outsource a lot of their SOC activities, but they also have internal
MSSPs?
teams. Yeah, right, absolutely. They go to an MSSTs, but they also have an internal team. So it's important to really understand what is your MSSP working at, actually really looking at from an alert perspective, and what kind of coverage do you have there before you start to augment that with your internal team, right?
Mhm.
So I think just that understanding in the details of what is my MSSP really looking for in my environment and just build off of that.
Phony Instagram support staff emails hit insurance company. Now, a prominent life insurance company headquartered in New York was hit by a phishing campaign recently. It appeared to be from Instagram technical support. The email bypassed Google's email security by using a valid domain name and spelled Instagram with a lowercase l in place of a capital I to fool the filters. The problem here is that the email itself came from membership form at outlook.com.tr, which is based in Turkey, and is clearly not from Instagram. The researchers said that despite these misspellings, it clearly demonstrates that people are not seeing anything more than the word membership form before clicking on the link. Eric, this is totally phishing 101, yet it still works. Why does this just continue to work? And by the way, there'll be another one just like this down the road.
Of course.
It's what is it that people need to be alerted to so this stops working as well as it does?
Yeah, I mean, so again, to your point, nothing new here. We're inundated with information, just like we talked about alert fatigue. We have social fatigue, right? We're
Mhm.
constantly being bombarded. Instagram's a very popular platform. Many people on it, right? So you see something from
I'm
Instagram,
on it.
oh, let me click, okay, and then it's over before it started, right? So the reality is I don't have the great answer to this because I've been in cyber for over 20 years. I've been training for over 20 years, and this stuff still happens, right? And the problem gets worse the more targeted phishing campaigns that you run. So, but I still believe in training. I think that there's a lot of new technology on the horizon to help us really prove the authenticity of some of this email, or at least give us confidence scores on how authentic it is, for the end user to have another piece of context to trust or not trust an email coming in, or even a text message, right? So I think we're
Uh,
moving in the right direction, but
well,
we still have challenges.
I think we've seen a couple of things about context. Educating people of actually looking at the email address. But there's a new technique that we've seen is putting these sort of color bars to indicate that it's an outside source or
Yeah,
a non-trusted source. But in addition, with those color bars, is changing the color of those color bars over time. Because like if you always get a red or an orange, over time that red or orange will kind of fade into the background. And so
absolutely.
you need to change that sort of color alert, if you will, so people think it's something new and unusual and different.
Agreed.
As our producer says, change the color blindness. Last
Valid.
story, Russia faces IT crisis with just 2 months of data storage left. Russia faces a critical IT storage crisis after Western cloud providers pulled out of the country, leaving it with only 2 more months before they run out of data storage. The Russian government is exploring various solutions to resolve this problem, including leasing all available domestic data storage, seizing IT resources left behind by the businesses that pulled out, and demand that ISPs stop their streaming services. Eric, we've all been there trying to delete files to free up space, but it seems that this is just one more surprise for a war that appears to have been planned using Cold War pre-internet strategy. What are your observations about the impact of cyber as a frontier in the war, or should we just advise Russia to empty its recycle bin?
Yeah. So when I read this article, it was one of these articles that I'm like, oh, okay, this is a consequence of war, right? Wasn't
Which
even thinking
I don't
about
think
that.
any of us predicted this one.
No, and I was totally shocked when I read it. But data is a problem, right? We all know that. And as a cybersecurity practitioner, we know that. I think over time, at the end of the day, data is a big part of our job and understanding where that is, right? And we know that data ownership is a problem, and a lot of us don't have data security programs, but we're building those programs, right? When you build those programs and put some governance in place, you actually have a shot at kind of reducing some of the data overflow or the amount of unstructured data or structured data just all over your infrastructure, right? So I think a lot of it is because we haven't had that governance in place and we haven't been taking care of our own backyard in that aspect, right? So that's why we have this problem. Russia and any other country is not immune to this same problem, right? We all struggle, whether in public sector or private sector, with this. So, I think we're getting better, but we're not even close to where we need to be, and we're going to continue to have these challenges.
Yet another thing to worry about for your own security productivity. Well, Eric, thank you very, very much. Before we close out here, I want to know are there any thumbs up or eye roller stories of the 8 stories that we covered in our week in review for you? Which one was your favorite, or you're like, I can't believe this one?
The one I couldn't believe is the Russia storage situation, right? I think it was an eye opener for me, and I wasn't even thinking about that, but it's a real problem.
It's a real problem that the consequence of war opened up for us. Well, where can people find you, Eric?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I believe there's a link there for that somewhere. You can find me on LinkedIn. Hit me up anytime. Happy to respond. Happy to have a conversation. We are hiring at Aptiv, so love to talk to you about that. We have a variety of positions we're hiring for, all the way from offensive security engineers to OT security engineers. So happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk.
All right. Well, I want to thank Eric Hussey, who is the CISO of Aptiv, and I want to thank our audience as well for listening to this. My prompter just went out, so I think I know how to close this show up because I know all these things. You can always check us out and do check out the CISO series, cybersecurity headlines, and we come out every single day. We have a great team of reporters, as you hear, and you just get 6 minutes of cybersecurity news every single day of the week. So if you're not subscribed already on your podcast feed, please do that as well. And next week, if you haven't joined the Super Cyber Friday event, another event that I host, please join us. Our topic next week is hacking prioritization, and we will be talking about essentially what are the vulnerabilities you need to worry about and ones you really don't need to pay attention to at all. You can find that link over on CISOseries.com. It's always a fun hour. And then an hour and a half after that, we are here back with the Week in Review. We appreciate you listening to the show, and Rich Stroffolino will be here next week. He'll want you to have a wonderful, sparkly day. But for me, I just hope it sparkles a little bit.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.